Hello friends, welcome back to Andertons TV. I'm here with Alex Jan from Novation. Focusrite. What do we got today?
So, we've got the brand new SL MkIII. We're taking a look today at the 61 key version, but it does come in a 49 and a 61 key. It's a really brand new controller for us, but one of the really key things that make this very unique compared to other controllers is it has an 8-track sequencer built into it. It's got dual CV gate and modulation output, and also dual MIDI output. So it really could be the centerpiece to either real hardware-based or maybe a DAW-based workflow.
Awesome.
So let's take a bit more detail and have a look at it.
Cool, so here we are with an incredible rainbow machine. We've got some friends here from Roland, Electron, some of my favourite modular bits and pieces. All I know about this is the little bits that I got from the bump, the press releasey type stuff. Take me on a tour, what do we got?
Yeah, so one of the key things to really think about is it's not just sort of one particular keyboard controller for software, for example. What makes it very unique is the fact that it can be, quite easily sit in the middle of anyone's setup, really. It will quite happily work with Ableton. Fundamentally, it is a master control keyboard which can sit into any kind of setup. So if you're working just within a computer, you could use it in that way, in a sort of conventional format. If you've got maybe external hardware, like you've mentioned already, for example, the Roland 01A or the Digitact or some Modular, that will easily hook up because we've actually got dedicated ports on the rear of the unit. We've got dual CV gate and modulation outputs, which can be assigned easily within the setup. And we've also got dual outputs for the MIDI output as well. Again, we can easily address that using the MIDI in, out, through, for example, and quite easily set up a quite sophisticated setup.
Awesome, so it's kind of as platform agnostic as you can possibly be, really.
Yeah, and what makes it very unique, I said, is the fact that we've got the 8-track sequencer built in. So if you look along the kind of the top of the, under the 5 displays here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 selections. So these effectively are your tracks. So I can select, say, track 1, and then we've got, if I scroll up, we've then got...
little section is reminding me a lot of the circuit video that we did, actually.
Exactly that. So the circuit and circuit monostation workflow will let you basically use and create ideas using these independent patterns. So as you rightly said, it borrows from that sort of heritage within our kind of workflow. So if we say select track 1, we can have either 1 or 1 to 8 selected, so we can chain those together. But if we want to delve in a bit deeper, let's have a look at that now. So if I press steps here, we've actually now got a 16-step sequencer. So if I just hit play, so what we've got going on there is a little bit of audio already working. So I select channel 2. Probably a good example. I've already got a little beat going there. So again, the way that I'm using this at the moment, this is actually hooked up to Ableton, which is just using one of their really cool drum racks. And we've already pre-mapped the 01A, so again, and we've also got the modular set up. So as you see there, all you do is select the track that you want to kind of play or to sequence. So as a good example, because I've already had some note data in that one pattern, if we go to the pattern mode and you see this sort of yellow corresponds to the track, so blue is blue, yellow is yellow. Let's clear that pattern. So quite easily, I can either go into the individual steps and clear them like holding the clear button and deleting that step like you'd have on circuit. Or if I go to patterns, I could press clear and select the pattern. See, they've both gone red. That's now cleared the pattern. So let's hit the transport control here. So hit play. That's now going to be going through the 16 steps. So as we were sort of selected the pattern mode, you can't see those steps yet. So if I just select steps, here you can quite clearly see. Now, I'm not much of a player, so maybe I want to kind of program some drums in the same way that you do on our circuit or circuit monostation. We can select, say, a kick drum. I could then maybe pop those into that 16 grid. Maybe more conventional kick, less kind of... And again, I could record that in.
Does it automatically quantize that stuff? Can you turn that off if you want?
Yeah, you can, in the same way that you can with circuit, you can delve deeper into the settings really of that pattern and actually change the behavior of that as well, which is a really, really cool feature. Nice. But just for the sake of showing something very quickly, we can again use the duplicate, like we did the clear pattern, we can duplicate the patterns over. So for example, if I wanted to maybe duplicate that over 4 times. On the 4th one, let's maybe have a little bit of a different fill. So again, go into steps, hit play again. Now, what makes it quite unique is the fact that although it's got an 8-track sequencer built into it, it's actually polyphonic. So I could say, for example, put an additional drum hit on a particular step. So let's say putting that on the kicks here. So when I've selected it, you can see the lights lit up.
That's pretty neat.
So now it gives me visual feedback that something else is layered on there. So if I hit play, now you can hear I've recorded that in there. So if I go back to sequencer mode, pattern mode, I can then select 1 to 4. That will now cycle through.
Oh, I see it do the little breathing thing, that's great.
So really nice to be able to kind of get ideas down very quickly, and I'm not looking at the computer screen as such. I just already loaded a really cool kind of drum rack on Ableton, and then I'm easy to get going with that. So if we basically say we've selected our drums onto track 2, so now we'll select track 1. Now, if I go to Shift and Templates, here we have up to 64 separate templates which can be used at any one time. Now we've obviously got our component software as well, which is pretty cool. So you can do all your editing and everything based around SL MkIII via this. So here's for example, we're going to use the 01. So today I knew we were going to use that, so I actually created an SH01 specific template.
Like a template that you can load per track because you know what you're going to connect,
exactly
which MIDI channel you're going to use, that kind of stuff.
Totally. So for example, I mean, you can see on the screen, we do ship it with, let me go up through some of the templates just to show you. So it will come with things obviously like our Peak, Base Station 2, there's Digitone, Digitact, Microkorg, there'll be TR8S, etc., Virus TI.
Profits in there, nice.
Yeah, so it's giving people like a good starting place. But as I said, one of the things that the component software really brings is the fact that it's very easy to customize this. I mean, I said select the 01 that I created earlier for the 01A. Again, it took me probably 5 minutes to go through. I can easily take control of things like the CC number. So if I can rename these, for example. So I wanted the filter is quite often something that people will always sort of grab. So you can easily then go into that, rename it. So let's just change that to say VCF cut, just to kind of show, and then save it. That then can basically be saved to a template pool. And then that can then be put onto, I've done lookup. So that will basically save to a template pool, and then you can easily back up all your storage to a separate storage device. Really helpful, again, if you wanted to kind of like share templates with other users, for example.
Easy, just chuck it over USB to update it on here.
That's nice. It. And again, because we've got so much I/O sort of options on the rear, one of the things you can do as well is easily select, say for example on track 1, you can also assign from that template page where you want that particular track sequencer to go to. Cool. So for example, we've got the DIN connection here, just on the MIDI cable. So I don't want it to go to my USB MIDI output to Ableton, and I want to select whatever channel I'm going to be on. But we're on channel 1 on this particular unit, and now if we go into the sequencer mode, we can then start actually playing the 01. Now, because I've already mapped it, things like the filter, cutoff, etc., that's all basically what I custom mapped earlier. So I've got 2 banks of options via our component software. So again, that's something that's really easy to set up. I really must stress how simple that is compared to
once you've done that, like something you mentioned before we started, this thing works standalone, doesn't it? Yeah,
exactly that. So although I've got Ableton set up connected to it here to kind of show it in a very quick workflow, a bit working with hardware synths as well as something in a DAW, I said it'll work potentially with Logic and also with Reason. It does come with Ableton Live Lite, and I've just, for the sake of this, showing how easy it is to work with Ableton as an option. But one of the great things about this, if you're not using it in a computer setup and there's people really wanting to use a lot of hardware, then it has its own dedicated sort of control to have transport, etc., controlled from it. Really, really neat. Now, let's kind of go into sequencing. So again, one of the things I will say about these parameters, on each of the 8 tracks, we have also got 8 lanes of automation. And again, the automation is recorded directly onto the unit. So what makes that really nice is if you are working with just a hardware-based setup, for example, you want to maybe have the filter, being opened and closed as an example on my sequences, I can easily record that in. So we'll come to that in a moment.
Probably use that to bodge some like duophonic stuff on a 2 oscillator mono.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of cool.
And again, you can customize this to be whatever you want. So for example, here, I've set this up to be an envelope, for example, which is quite useful. So again, you could automate maybe the decay opening a little bit with the filter. But again, we'll come to that in a mode, just have a little bit of a play. Now, I am not a keys player. I said I'll do kind of a couple of chord shapes, etc. Obviously, not like this one, but just to give you an example, I'm not a keys player. One of the really neat features about the SL series, SL MkIII series as well, is that we're easily able to use a scale mode. Now, if I go to scales by pushing the scales button, I can assign what I want to send where via scales. So for example, on track 2, I'm controlling just some drums into Ableton. So I don't want to use a scale on that. Again, it can yield quite interesting results, but again, you don't necessarily want to force it to or correct your playing if you like, if you've selected a specific drum sound. But the other things that we've got connected, I want to assign it. Say, I want the SH01 because my playing's not very good, and maybe on the modular, yeah, okay, I want to assign that. So it's very easy just to be able to select where you want that scale kind of to affect. Now, if I turn on by holding shift and scales, by turning now the scale on, notice now the keyboard actually has a scale kind of lit on it. So it's quite cool because you can actually start playing completely within that scale. And again, if your playing's bad or sloppy like mine, you can easily play a wrong note and it will sort of snap to the next possible note for it, which is really cool. There's different sort of ways that scale will work. So for example, if we use filter, basically it just won't play a note. So if I'm in snap, it's like, oh, you played there, but you must be wanting to play that note.
Yeah.
Filters, like you played a duff note, but no one wants to hear it. And then display only is really cool. You can maybe go into some really interesting jazz or blues scale or something like that, where the kind of the fun in the in between, if you like,
get
between notes.
Chromatics if you're slightly better than both of us.
Yeah, that's it. But what's nice about that is that, again, you can sort of experiment with every single note, but the LEDs will give you visual feedback.
Nice.
Again, some people that we spoke to highlighted a couple of things. You can change the LED behavior via the settings as well, which is really cool. So one of the things, if you go to the global page, I can either turn off things like the sequencer LEDs. I might not want to have visual, feedback from that or whatever. And also you can turn that on and off there. But also you can see like your root note and things like that by what's brightly lit. So again, it depends if people want to, for me, I find that very useful. But some players, if they're on stage and it's low light, you can easily say, actually, I don't want to necessarily see every sequence note. But again, I find it very useful. So we've turned the scale on and we've assigned it to our hardware. So now let's jump into doing some sequencing. So we just select, so track 1, pattern 1. And if we go press steps, now for example, we just got a little random kind of beat going. So let's pick C. Now I can obviously record as well, because again, players out there, like, I don't want to step sequence everything. You can of course use the keyboard to do that, but you can add something in there.
A single note, incredible.
Wow, that's it. There you get your royalties for that for sure. So obviously, in the same way that with circuit and circuit monostation, we got lots of different controls over those as well. So say for example, we want to go into, I think it's on the option. So for example, we go to gate. If I tell this note, it was quite a short note, it's only going to sort of do one step. I'll tell you what, let's make that maybe a few steps, for example. So what's quite cool is you can kind of get a bit more of an interesting result rather than just kind of one step and it's just a step length. You can actually adjust that. In the same way, in the options page is where you can adjust things like pattern behavior. Now, remember we did the circuit monostation.
Oh, is this like the pendulum kind of stuff?
Exactly that.
Oh, I love
so
that
you've
kind of
got the forward motion, so we just hit play. We can do maybe backward, again, to kind of get an interesting result. We can do ping pong, which is that kind of pendulum back and forward, which again is quite interesting in certain genres. Or random again. So again, really giving that circuit workflow,
Nice.
and fresh thinking really of sequencing. So let's just leave it in forward mode as an example. Again, you can change the sync rate. So for example, you could have maybe 1/8, for example. Now, one of the things I thought was quite cool, if you're doing like a longer pad or something like that, you could actually have like each step last longer. So in theory, again, utilising those 16 steps in a bit more of a kind of an interesting way rather than being sort of stuck to a specific grid. So nice and easy.
So you've shown us pattern chaining. What if you want longer sequences? Is it just a case of chaining patterns?
Yeah, exactly that. So say, for example, we like the pattern that we've just written, and if we duplicate that by holding duplicate, select the pattern, and then we'll just assign it across. And again, on that fourth pattern, let's do a little variation. So all I've done there is selected pattern 4, so it'll just play pattern 4 now. But remember, my beat, I've already selected 1 to 4, so that's still going to give us that flavour that we want for that little fill at the end. So again, if you want to maybe overdub something, have a little jam on that end maybe. then let's record that in. Great. So now we've got a little variation there as well. So again, we might decide that we want to pattern chain the 1 to 4, so we could have that really sort of follow the drums.
Yeah, the visual feedback of the breathing thing is pretty cool.
Now again, we might want to say, look, let's just use the pattern 3 and 4. So again, we could select that, or pattern 4 and 5, or whatever you want. That's completely kind of up to you how you want to play. So now again, we'll have the drums going 1 through 4, and then we've actually got 3 and 4 doing a 2-bar loop.
Cool.
So very, very cool in how that works. So let's just quickly jump ahead. So now I think on 3, I set up to have a pad. So now this really, although it says MIDI, this will basically work with our Ableton page here. So let's just record in maybe some little chord or something. So now if I want to record, for example, let's record something slightly longer on this. So again, I'm not a good keys player as such, apologies for that. Let's just select, say, 1 to 8 as an example. So if we press stop, we'll just start at the beginning, and we'll hit record and play. Now it's actually recorded through 1 through 8 on that. So we've actually got an 8-bar loop with that, which is a kind of a cool feature. And again, so that all I did there is just to explain really, we've set up this Andy's pad via the wavetable synth on Ableton. So we just, we dedicate any MIDI channel, we just tell it that, you know, input 3 is our channel track 3 on here, which again represents this kind of turquoisey kind of blue. So in the same way, again, maybe now we want to do something on the modular setup. Let's just run through that. So I've selected track 8. Now we did do a bit of tuning before we started, so that we know that is in sync.
Just hope we're still in tune.
Yeah, good old modular. But again, that's quite a cool feature actually. So just to mention, so we did do some tuning on there, and some modules that aren't necessarily as easy to calibrate or aren't always calibrated, we've added that feature in our options section really within the SL's kind of SL MkIII's sort of operating system. So again, if you do have a piece of modular kit that never really plays that nicely with a sequencer, we've got you covered with the SL MkIII. You can delve deeper into that and actually really calibrate that to exactly as you need it. So really super simple to work with it. So just to give you an example, let's maybe just record something on that. Now, one of the things I haven't mentioned just yet, we've mentioned obviously we've got an 8-track sequencer built into it. We've actually also added an arpeggio as well. So an arpeggiator, sorry. So in the same way we activate the scale mode by shift and on, in the same way we activate the sequencer with shift and on, we can now shift and press ARP, so shift and on for the arpeggiator, sorry I should say. If I now hit play, so I've selected channel 8 as an example.
Just get like an octave.
Yeah, go for it. So if I latch that now, so you can that higher note as well is quite cool, isn't it? So now, as an example, so we've got that kind of latched on the arpeggiator. So now if we go into the actual ARP, we can actually adjust the flavour of it by selecting the notes we want.
Ah, that's really cool. So not just kind of your box standard rhythms, you can do pretty much whatever you want.
And again, we can go delve deeper into that. So I can tell it the part, for example, the arpeggiator will either follow me around my selected track, or I might say, no, I want it to be on track 8 because that's where I know I want my arpeggiator. So, for example, we assign that again, do that again, so whatever note you did to it. Change the octave. Quite wild what's going on there, so again, but you get the flavour of what
because
can be
we're
achieved.
real musicians.
That's it.
I assume you could address that modulation port with one of the automation lanes in the sequencer.
Exactly that.
Awesome.
So it's a really, really cool and very powerful feature. I think let's try and show some of that actually. One of the neat things, if I jump back to the 01, just one of the things we set up earlier. So if I leave that playing, so say for example on here, now if I then hit record,
Oh, Love how it turns red.
Went red.
That was great.
And you can then see there. Now that sounds absolutely terrible. What am I doing? I don't know why I've done that. So if I press clear and then turn that encoder again, it blanks out. So I've deleted that automation as well. Really easy then to be able to quickly kind of get creative. Or if you think, oh, I shouldn't have done that, you can always easily overdub it. So if I hit record, just filter cut off. It's probably better the first time. So let's do it again. Clear, turn that. So that automation data is saved actually again within the sequencer. And I said because we've got 8 channels of it, we can maybe dedicate that to something else. So let's say for example, open up the decay. So there's a bit of automation going on there basically. So again, really kind of easy to get going with that to automate kind of whatever you want. Okay, so one of the great things about working with certain synths and workstations I always found was zones. Now again, I'm not a keys player, but again, there's a lot of people that find benefit to be able to play sort of multiple sound sources.
Splits and layers, that kind of stuff.
Exactly that. So again, in the same way that you turn on the sequencer, the scales or the ARP, if I hold shift in zones, I'm now turned on my zones.
Pretty
we've
lights.
now, because we've got scale mode activated, certain LEDs are obviously not lit. So for example, you might want to have, a bit more control over that. So let's turn scales off just for the sake of argument on this particular example. Now obviously all the LEDs are lit. So you can go into your zone mode and you can activate kind of zone 1 as an example. You can tell it where you want your
Up
high
to
and low
8
notes.
zones, nice.
Yeah, that's it. So really powerful and what can be achieved. And again, some people like the idea of having kind of a bass line or whatever on, down low, kind of more like a conventional kind of workstation setup. Then you can have maybe drums, for example, on zone 2 and so on. So really easy to be able to take control of the range of those notes as well. Because again, you might find that if you're playing just, very kind of round one particular area of a bass sort of part, you might want to have the rest of it for a piano part or something like that. So you can easily adjust that. Just
visual feedback's just so good.
Again, yeah, one of the things I used to love on old samplers was that kind of visual feedback when using kind of little OS screens, etc. But that was a really cool feature. Again, just making it nice and easy, jumping between sort of different zones. So again, we can then easily set our zones differently here again. You can have a bit of overlap or whatever. So again, really useful for that. And then again, that can then send to the designated track as well. So again, it doesn't matter if you're working maybe with external hardware or computer, you can easily then set that up just via that zones page. So very cool. But again, obviously, like I explained, that isn't computer driven. That can work just on the standalone mode as well.
Is there anything, apart from like the in control, obviously that's more DAW integration, anything that doesn't work without a computer? Well, there's like templates which you have to make on a computer, but that's kind of obvious.
Yeah, I'd say the kind of the conventional sequencer mode, so our 1 to 8, the arpeggiator, and the pads, etc., that will work without the computer. The in control is obviously when you want to work with your DAW and things like that. So yeah, that's the one thing that if the computer's not connected, it won't sort of send that data to it.
Yeah.
But again, easily just to connect up the USB and then work in that way.
Nice.
Like I said, I find it's almost like multiple units to do different jobs within one product. So a bit like we were saying, if you turn on the hardware in the morning, get ideas down very quickly. Maybe you kind of turn on a couple of units just to get inspiration and think, oh, that's great. That's a really useful feature. Now again, one thing I will mention that we haven't come to yet is obviously we've mentioned templates, but we also have sessions as well. So all of these individual sessions can be selected. So we can easily store 64 sessions.
That being like a song, I guess?
Yeah, that's it. So think of the sessions as a collection of templates and also the patterns, etc. on your tracks.
So it says initialized in there. Can you rename them?
Yeah, so that can be renamed again using our components page. So when you're connected to it, you can then easily jump on it and then save things to that. So again, quite useful in a live situation because you might be able to, like you can on circuit and circuit monostation, recall track 2, 3, 4, 5 and so on. Awesome. So again, just making that workflow super simple. And again, you might spend kind of a long time getting certain patterns or certain parts that you can't necessarily do live, but actually because you don't necessarily have to rely on a computer, that's a really nice feature to be able to take control in a live situation. If it's part of someone's keyboard rig, for example, that really again sets it apart from many other sort of products out there. So that's kind of a very basic overview of what you can achieve really with tracks sort of 1 through 8. So this is basically, that could be used, I mean obviously we're using Ableton as a sound source to kind of see how it can be kind of an in-between DAW and external. But if you were working in just external mode, you wouldn't necessarily have a computer set up.
Over
Now,
USB, it's just chucking MIDI anyway.
Exactly
isn't it?
that. So if I now, for example, hit in control, which is this button here, now some people will be kind of a bit more familiar with this for what I would call the sequencer sort of DAW control mode. So in the same way that we were selecting our tracks 1 through 8 on the sequencer, which again can be assigned to go to the USB or to external sources, whatever you want. If I press in control, now we're easily taking control of our DAW. So I find personally when I'm working, I'll end up probably working with hardware and maybe a little bit of software, but then when I've kind of got to a certain point, I may want to actually take the mix further and get a bit more creative in the computer, which again, I'm sure a lot of users will use that. But again, maybe you're an in-the-box user and you don't have lots of hardware, but you're kind of, you are lusting after that kind of sequencer technology of yesteryear, especially where people like getting kind of interesting results by using a hardware sequencer. With the sort of update sort of twist on it with the SL MkIII, you've got all of those 8 channels of sequencing, or the arpeggiator, for example, to help you get a bit more creative. And sometimes people hit a big writer's block, but actually sort of turning to that old school kind of sequencer mode can be a really, really fun way to yield really interesting results. Maybe you're using some plugins, some software, third-party things, maybe use Complete or something like that. It's a really kind of cool way to get much more out of your kind of your standard workflow.
Yeah, I've always found there's nothing less inspiring than clicking through a DAW. So
Sure.
you get hands-on with a bit of hardware. That's pretty cool.
And it gives you that same real-world feel, of using other instruments, and it will have you covered to expand. So a very, very kind of neat feature. So one of the things I will mention really, so we've got again our banks here for control. So again, what have I selected here? I've got the wavetable selected. So just to sort of, so if I go into this, let's just go back into sequencer mode. So now, we've already got things mapped here, so resonance. So some of the things that have already been pre-mapped, they've kind of tried to make it as simple as possible with the script, just so it'll actually kind of be things you will use, things like volume, whatever it may be. So I found that kind of quite useful when you're getting to grips with kind of how things have been laid out. One of the really cool things about it as well is that if you're wanting to easily assign maybe to use the sequencers, the track sequencers automation lanes, you can easily assign the outputs to this as well by using the CC enabled devices as well, and map that yourself. But again, I think if you're used to working with kind of pad style controllers that work with Ableton, this kind of really brightly lit sort of LED screen gives you a lot of visual feedback of what's going on. So very, very cool.
The amount of colour you get on this, actually, it might seem like when you turn it on, it does this incredible little rainbow thing. It might seem like a bit of a gimmick, but actually having the visual feedback, the differentiation between parts, is actually really useful.
Yeah. No, awesome. I mean, as I said, in this kind of conventional Ableton mode, if you like, is really useful when you're wanting to either maybe, let's go to the drum kit as an example.
Do we have velocity on these pads?
Yes. Awesome. So you can really get very sort of expressive feedback really from these as well. So again, things like if you're programming drums, you can easily sort of select under grid mode. You can really start getting some good results with that, which is really, really cool. So again, we can easily just select into sort of which mode we want to use. So as an example, let's say for example on channel 2, I want to record arm. We can easily navigate here on this bank. So we've got things like mutes, for example. We've got solos, again, making life a bit easier, already mapped for you. So if we record arm, for example, those 2 channels, and then if I go into a grid mode, I really like that kind of keys thing that I played. So again, maybe I want to kind of free up that particular track to use another piece of hardware. We can easily then record the input and then use this in a kind of conventional kind of re-trigger mode, a bit like our Launchpad series, for example. So yeah, that's kind of doing its thing. So now it's gone green, if you can see, instead of red. So if I hit green, that's now playing back. If I turn off the input, so it's off, that will now in theory just be the playback of this particular channel. We've recorded the MIDI data actually within to that channel 2, which is where the Andes pad is, and then I could assign that channel 2 to go and do something else. So really, really kind of nice way to get ideas down and really utilise those 8 tracks to absolute maximum kind of what you want to do with them.
Yeah, so you can kind of do like the equivalent of bouncing down, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly that.
More tracks.
But again, some people like to work in that kind of setup where you can easily kind of use our kind of Launchpad style, so you can navigate. You see the grid moving around around the screen.
Yeah.
We can easily navigate to where we want to go, and then we can use the sort of the play buttons to launch this particular scene as well. So again, super friendly to get going with that. Again, one of the things I really liked about the this kind of workflow, again, if I go back into sequencer mode as an example. Now obviously, because we're recording the MIDI data, so if I select maybe channel 3 again, set my input on this again. Now, so one of the things I really like about Ableton and the new features in 10 is you're jamming an idea when you're using this maybe in a more conventional kind of control keyboard way, and you think, oh, I really, really like that, but I can never play it again. Again, someone that never doesn't play keys, I find sometimes the first couple of takes, I think, oh, I wish I could get that kind of bad timing that actually works really well in a particular track. So easily, again, when you go into in control and then press shift, we've actually added the capture feature as well. So I use the capture button, that'll actually record the notes that I just played in as well.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a really, really useful feature for me, again, just because, those happy accidents which can be achieved when you kind of sit at a keyboard. And again, just under the in control mode, if I hold shift, again, I might want to undo that because I think actually it wasn't very good and I'm kidding myself. Or I might want to redo it again. Maybe you made a mistake and you actually, no, I did like that. So you can use this kind of functionality, again, not having to necessarily stare at the screen and use a mouse, keeping you all around your center workpiece that the SL MkIII will give you. And again, things like turning the click on off, quite useful for, again, when you're jamming or capturing an idea and you're trying to keep in that creative flow on the unit.
Great having the screens as well responding to what modes you're in, so you don't have to remember if it's green and that one over there is red, that means, like, it just literally just tells you right next to it what it's doing.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of that. So that's the kind of initial overview really of the unit and kind of seeing how it can easily work with, whether it be, a dedicated piece of synthesizer, whether it have CV gate or something more current, as long as it can be addressed via the MIDI or the CV gate outputs, then you can easily take control of it. I said the fact that it will work in a standalone mode for me is great. I said there's some days where I sort of go into a studio, turn it on and just kind of have a jam and get some ideas down, and then I might actually then turn the computer on and try and capture and record my ideas and what I've been playing with.
The less I can use a computer, the better, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes people, like this kind of connectivity and routing that a computer will give them. Something like the SL MkIII for me will give you that kind of connectivity nice and easily, but then again, when you're in computer mode, as I call it, you can easily jump into that. So yeah, I mean, is there any other questions that you've got?
Yeah, we got different sizes of this. Obviously, we've got a 61 here. Is there a 49? Is there an 88?
So yeah, we've got a 49 key version and the 61 key.
Gotcha.
So again, with varying sort of different users.
Never going to be able to pack it all into anything smaller. So
there's a lot of technology here. So yeah, definitely that's the offering we have is the 49 and the 61.
Awesome. And when's it going to be unleashed onto the unsuspecting public?
As I said, we're actually shooting this video obviously day before release, so it's quite exciting to be able to give you a first look. We're announcing it on the 10th, and they'll be available to ship, I believe, end of October. So for more information about price and availability and to place your order from Andertons,
Andertons.co.uk.
Follow the link under the video. But yeah, that's
awesome.
great.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
That's great.
See you in the next one.
Thank you.